if game 1 was perfectly scripted for the Guardians, game 2 is one of those scripts that might have been a horror movie for the Guardians. One, you just want to tear into 1,000 pieces, set on fire, and never think about again. Unfortunately, we can't do that.
Tanner Bagby, the Guardians, and you're listening to Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Does that make this a spooky season episode of Locked On Guardians with the horror show today? This episode is brought to you by something definitely not spooky at all. That is Booking.com. Booking.yeah, the right state can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today.
That was definitely something out of a horror show. I think if you could have given Guardians fans a list of the worst nightmares in the playoffs, that's definitely going to be like number 1, number 2. Number 1 would be like somehow Jose getting hurt, but number 2 would be Clase blowing a game. Like that would be Michael Myers level crazy. There was not, this is a spoiler alert. Wasn't the most recent Halloween movie? It was the second to last installment. And there was a scene, this is a spoiler, where they're carrying Michael like crowd surfing, and they're just doing all kinds of unimaginable things to try to, unalive him. And of course he lives, and I'm like, of course he does, because he comes back from anything. I don't know. This game would just be like thinking you're going to win it, and then the way they play it, you think you're going to get to the 9th inning and scoreless, and then it just never says die, like the Tigers. Bullpen losses, they stink. They just stink. They're the worst way to lose. I'm not even doing the intros. I'm Justin Latta. That's Jeff Ellis. We've been covering the Guardians in the draft for quite some time. That's our intros. We've been doing this for a long time, and we know that these kind of losses stink. I said it so many times, Jeff. This season has been a lot of fun because from the 6th inning on, if the Guardians are winning, they're going to win the game. And you feel it's fun to watch when Cade Smith's going to come in and strike out 3 guys, and Emmanuel Clase is going to come in the 9th inning and end the inning on 9 pitches or something. That's fun to have that reliability and know that their team's chances of coming back are slim to none when those guys come out of the bullpen. And that's why these losses absolutely stink. You could have told me a million different ways the Guardians could have lost this game, and I would challenge you to find something as unrealistic as Emmanuel Clase allowing a 3-run homer.
He only allowed 5 runs all year.
No 3-run homers his entire career.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting texts during the 9th inning, and Jake Rogers got the hit. I'm like, all right, it's fine. He never gives up 2 hits in a row. And then Trey Sweeney gets a hit, and I'm like, okay. People are like, oh, this isn't good. And I'm like, all right, it's not great, but I'm like, what are the odds of Clase getting up 3 hits in a row? And I was watching on YouTube TV, which is like a good for being a pitch or 2 behind game day. So I had game day open because, I'm a glutton for punishment, and my anxiety's too bad for this to wait. And game day shows in-play runs. And I'm like, oh God, what happened? And I'm like, okay, well, he probably gave up a BABIP single. He got blooped as Clase always does. And I'm like, okay, well, 1 run's not insurmountable in the 9th inning because Skubal's out of the game. And game day didn't update fast enough to catch up with the TV to tell me what happened. It just told me in-play runs. So I had to see the 3-run homer before I knew it was a 3-run homer, which was like, worse for my anxiety. And I was like, a 3-run homer. Like, of all things I thought were going to happen there, a 3-run homer was not on my bingo card. But then again, neither was John Noel being a defensive star of this game. Neither was scoring 5 runs before recording an out Saturday. This has just been a weird series already.
And the one thing I'll say too, it's like I had this debate with you. The thing I don't understand is why you even throw to Kerry Carpenter. Like, it was a small sample size, but that guy was one of the 5 best right-handed hitters in baseball this year when he was healthy. They have 2+ hitters in that lineup. And I don't Like you got Matt Vierling coming off of but right behind him. And I know, and I like Matt Vierling. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a solid starter, but there's a big gap between Carpenter and Riley Green and the rest of that lineup. Just like there's a big gap between like Jose and Naylor, and maybe Quan, now that he may not have done a ton in this one, but I still believe in Stephen Quan. But I don't, in that specific situation, there's one guy you don't want to throw to. You got first base open. I don't like pitching around guys in general, but that's the situation where you do it. That is the guy. That is the moment where you do that.
I think it just stinks that he was even up in that situation because you allowed base hits to the 8 and 9 hitter and Rogers and Sweeney. And that's why I kept saying it'll be fine. Like even Rogers got out. I'm like, all right, it's fine. He'll get Sweeney. It's not a big deal. Either one of those guys, you get those guys out, the inning's over. You're out of this. It's not a big deal. I just didn't, credit to the Tigers for turning the lineup over and getting that matchup because that was the last thing you wanted to see. The Cleveland managed I thought Vogt managed a great game, and we can talk about some second guessing of moments like pitching to Carpenter there, sequencing, and when they brought Clase in. I think up until the top of the 8th inning, Vogt managed. I don't think he managed a bad game in the 9th inning either, but I think he just completely. Shouldn't say completely is probably too strong, but he put on a really good show managing this game. You and I were texting back and forth about the idea of Matt Boyd facing the top of the order a third time. I didn't love that.
But I was always planning for him to get through Malloy. That was just in my head. It's like you're trying to keep Carpenter out. So he's Malloy is his final guy no matter what.
Yeah, it was the risk of, okay, do you let Malloy see Boyd a third time or do you let Carpenter in the game? You have to weigh that risk. And that was the right call, was to say, okay, the matchup versus Malloy a third time is better than him or anybody facing Kerry Carpenter. You can see why they worked so hard to keep him on the bench as much as they could, because they were able to get Boyd through him, and then they brought in Cade Smith, and then you're able to bring in Herron by the time the lineup flipped over. So it kept Carpenter on the bench for 4 times through the order, or 3 times, I should say. He got 2 at bats. And I thought, oh, wow, this is great. They limited him to 1 at bat, and he popped out, worked out perfectly, right? He only got 1 at bat off. Was it Gaddis? I think it was Gaddis. Gaddis got him to pop up. So he only had 1 at bat before the 9th inning. And I thought, wow, he's not going to get a second at bat. They did a great job of keeping him neutralized. And it's not on Vogt that it happened. It's on the execution that it wasn't allowed to happen. And again, you can second guess whether or not they should have pitched him in that situation. And
that's where you can second guess Vogt. That's where you can say, like,
right. And you can also second guess the game calling. So I think it hurts worse again because Rogers and Sweeney got on to turn the lineup over to
you
him.
got to knock out the guys who are terrible. Like,
right. 8 and 9. You can't let, like,
Cleveland's terrible hitters didn't do anything. You need to make sure they're terrible hitters don't do anything.
Imagine Austin Hedges gets like we'll talk about this in the next segment, the missed opportunities for the Guardians to score. But imagine it's the 9th inning and Austin Hedges gets a base hit to start a rally. That stinks because Austin Hedges, nobody wants to watch him bat. I don't think he even wants to bat, but it just stinks because you're letting a guy at the bottom of the order make a difference in the game. Like if Kerry Carpenter was just scheduled to hit in that inning and you just had to face him and he hits a home run, a solo home run, a 2-run homer, that's life. The fact that you turned over 8-9 and had to get to him in that spot, I think is what makes this hurt worse. Because I think coming into this game, you knew you were up against long odds. You knew that scratching out a run versus Tarik Skubal was going to be hard enough. But as you said, as you kept getting deeper into the game and you kept matching 0 for 0 with him, and you got Boyd out of the game and you turned over to the bullpen, you felt like you neutralized things a little bit. And all you had to do was just scrape one together. And they had some opportunities. It just stinks the way you lost because it's the least expected way that you would ever think this team would lose a game in October because Clase has just been so great this year. And the other
reminiscent of Brad Hand in 2020.
Well, okay, but Brad Hand was falling off the rails at the end of 2020. His velocity was gone. His control stunk. Like,
well, we saw someone else today with a big velocity drop, which was a bit of a concern.
Yeah, we could talk about that later too. The sequencing. I know a lot of people were upset about the slider, and at the end of the day, like, you can't throw a middle slider, especially when it's the third one you've thrown in a row in that at bat. I tweeted the numbers though, Kerry Carpenter versus sliders this year. Not great. Like his weighted on base average, for those who are not familiar, WOBA, is like it instead of going by like OPS or slugging, it's giving an average to every outcome. So like a single's worth X amount and a double's worth twice that, a triple, whatever. Like it gives greater weight to the better offensive outcome, and walks are included, all that kind of stuff. Kerry Carpenter this year against sliders, 288 WOBA, 265 expected weighted on base average. So very bad against sliders, very good against cutters. I will say though, the Tigers and Carpenter has proven this throughout the series. He will chase the high fastball and he will not hit it. He did it against Tanner Bybee. He chased the high heat against Hunter Gaddis as well. And Clase threw a great slider earlier in that at bat. It was high and in. He came up empty. The second slider he was late on, and he just fouled it. He didn't get a good piece of it. I probably would have gone back to the cutter there, but at the same time, if Clase throws that slider anywhere else, it's probably a foul ball. It's probably a ground ball. Like it's not any damaging. So you can pick nits at the sequencing there, but it made sense. Carpenter generally does destroy cutters. He struggles with them high. You could have gone there. You could have not gone to the slider. Bottom line, if Clase doesn't throw a middle slider, we're probably talking about this game going to the bottom of the ninth and tied or in extra innings. And this is a very, very different conversation. Do you have any second thoughts on Clase coming in to get Wenzel Perez the inning before? Because Quan, and I know we're going to see some Tigers comments on this. There's already been on Twitter that it wasn't a catch, it was a trap. The original,
you couldn't overturn that.
If the original call was a base hit, I would have found it very hard for them to overturn that. The original call was a catch, so it stood because there was no evidence to turn it over either way. But the result notwithstanding, do you have any second guesses about Clase coming in to get Perez for potentially a four out inning or outing? It wasn't going to be a save situation, but a 4-out outing instead of letting Gaddis get Perez, because Gaddis, he gave the double to Verling, but he carved through Carpenter that inning.
Yeah, he also gave up a walk. I mean, he faced four dudes.
Well, that was an intentional walk to Riley Green.
Fair enough. Yeah, it was pitching on Green, right? I mean, he didn't look particularly great either, if we are being honest.
He cut through Carpenter and Cole Keith. I thought Carpenter gave him a challenge, but he diced right through Cole Keith, no problem.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Like he did get through Cole Keith pretty easily, and Carpenter was just. I mean, maybe it's because I was already like afraid of Carpenter. Like that was such a pins and needles at bat for me in general that like I was just like, oh crap. So that could be me projecting. But I do think it was, like I said, I just don't think it was the best performance we've seen. Like, him and that was kind of the problem. Like Cade was fantastic, but Heron and Gaddis were not quite as sharp in this one. And that, just made it a little more difficult. Like I understand going to Clase there. There's that part of me that like, I'd have to go and look, I think they chose the right time to go to Cade Smith and to Heron and get like, these were all logical points. Unfortunately, Heron and Gaddis didn't take care of business today. And, they went to Morgan and he was able to clear it out.
Heron and Gaddis didn't allow a run though.
But they both,
I don't know how you could say Heron walked one guy.
You want more than 2/3 of an inning from Heron. You want more than 2/3 of an inning from Gaddis. You want those guys to be a little more consistent. They didn't give up a run, but the reason they give up a run is they weren't given more opportunities to. You're getting an inning and 2/3, nearly 2 innings from Cade. You need Heron and Gaddis to each give you an inning. You need that extra out, so then you don't have to go to Clase, who has not been great in multi-inning throughout his career, at least in my mind, anecdotally. So.
Clase last year 2022 in the playoffs in the ALDS did have a 2-inning outing where I think I want to say he won that game in New York. They won that game. I don't know if he was the winning pitcher, but they won that game. He threw 2 innings. And then this year against New York, he also pitched 2 innings on the road. That was that crazy extra inning game, and he didn't give a run. So, like, he hasn't done it a lot, but he's done well when he's done it. So the only question is, like, did him having to go out there in the 8th inning, make it a little bit more difficult for him? I just wish, he was able to get through Rodgers and able to get through Sweeney. It wouldn't have been an issue.
You got to take care of business, like bottom line, right? Like you have to.
But you had extra pitches. You had an extra time for him to sit down and have to get back up after the 8th and 9th inning, which, he's going to do in the playoffs if this team's going to go a little bit further than this. But it didn't work out there. So like I said, I think Vogt managed a heck of a game here. He did a great job of neutralizing Kerry Carpenter as long as he could. The lineup was fine. We'll talk about that. I didn't have any real qualms about when he went to the bench. Just that was the one little nitpick you can have, and it ended up being an inflection point on the game, unfortunately. We'll talk about some missed opportunities for the Guardians. We'll give Matt Boyd some kudos because he was great. We'll talk about a little about who's facing more of a pressure point in Game 3. We're not going to preview Game 3 today, but we are going to talk ahead to Game 3 and just talk about the momentum shift of the series and who the pressure kind of falls on as this goes back to Detroit, all coming up on the rest of today's Lockdown Guardians. Today's episode of Lockdown Guardians is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Explore those U.S. cities you always want to secretly learn more about. Baseball cities, maybe there's some great cuisine. I enjoy going to other cities and also trying like restaurants I've seen on TV shows. That's always fun. I've done that a couple times as well. Maybe Booking.com will make you a fan of Detroit, even though the Guardians lost this game to Detroit. We've said it on the show multiple times that if Cleveland wasn't facing Detroit, we'd be rooting for Detroit. My wife says that's a great stadium. I haven't been there yet, but I want to cross that off the list someday. And when we do, I know we will be using Booking.com to find the right the right hotel for us in Detroit, because Booking.com delivers exactly the right U.S. stay for you. So even if you're upset losing to Detroit, we think Booking.com can help make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. That's Booking.com, Booking.yeah. If you want more wallowing in the Guardians' loss of Game 2 after you're done listening to us, maybe you want to hear about what happened in New York and Kansas City as we're recording this. It's 4-1 Kansas City. If you want a national perspective on that, check out Locked On MLB with our pal Sully. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, your sport, every day. Where do you want to go next, Jeff? You want to talk about the missed spots and the missed offensive opportunities, the few they had in this game?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, that was at least for me, that was pretty frustrating. Like the David Fry one was the one that just and we talked about, even though that guy hits lefties well, he's kind of a bad fit there. Just because the profile of what he struggles against is what Skubal throws. But there's also like the little things like before Naylor's double, like Lane Thomas was inches away from a double of his own. Like it's the stuff like that. And yeah, one can make complaints at points. I know I did about like the final strike of the game. But I'm not gonna, as we said yesterday, that's not, though it was funny. Someone brought up for all the complaining about that. Apparently, according to the ump score people, Game 1, Cleveland lost a run and a half through bad play calling. It was very biased to Detroit. So I'll be curious to see how they evaluate this one. Again, I'm not going to really complain about that because at the end of the day, it's annoying, but like they needed to step up. They needed to have a timely hit. They needed, they could just, kind of like the last time they faced Skubal, they had opportunities. They just couldn't chain it together.
Yeah, the strike zone didn't really have an outcome on the game. Just funny, I had written down throughout the game, and I was telling our people, I said, wow, it was Ramon. Is it Ramon DeJesus who called the game behind the plate? Yeah. I thought his strike zone for the balance of the game was really good. He ended up bat the 7th inning versus Quan, where he kind of let things expand. And I'm like, Tarik Skubal doesn't need help with outside of the zone calls. Like, he doesn't need that help. Trust me. And the Guardians don't need it either. And then the ninth inning against David Fry was just a poop show. Like, it was terrible. That was one of the worst at bats I've ever seen umpired. It didn't matter. Like there were 2 strikes in that at bat that he took that were just not even competitive pitches. And I think Ramon was just like, yeah, I want to go check out one of the steakhouses here before we head to Detroit. So that's all I can think of. But anyway, they had chances in the 5th. You had the Naylor double, the Noel hit by pitch, and then you had Andres Jimenez. And I know some people are kind of mad about how he didn't take any pitches. Andres Jimenez got a middle fastball from Tarik Skubal, and he hit it 101 miles an hour off the bat. And I think I texted you. I think it said it had a 430 expected batting average, which when it comes to expected batting average isn't like super high, but it's pretty good. He picked on a middle pitch and he hit it hard and he hit it at somebody. That's sometimes the way the ball bounces. I have no problem with that right there. If that ball gets into the hole, I don't even know if Josh Naylor scores anyway because it's Josh Naylor, but it puts 3 on and 1 out, and that's a huge opportunity. But unfortunately, it was a double play, and that really stinks. And the David Fry one, like you said, just that stunk too. And then the 7th inning, you got him, you were ready to knock him out. Was that the 7th inning? It wasn't the 7th inning that was David Fry's double play in the 7th inning?
It feels like it was. Let me just quickly look at the
Or was it the 8th inning?
That was this. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. The wrong thing opened. So now let me quickly scroll through the game. It was the 6th. It
was the 6th inning. That was the big opportunity missed because that was a 1-out double by Brian Rocchio, which turned the lineup. So I had the 5th and the 7th on the screen. It was the 5th and the 6th. Rocchio doubles and Kwan comes up in singles. So it was important for Rocchio to turn the lineup over and on second, then Kwan singled, and then David Fry's double play against Skubal. Those were your only 2 chances to score runs, and you came up empty. And that's what's gonna change the game is if you scratch across the run or a run in each of those innings or even one. And I think you said it before we started recording. Like, how much does that change the momentum? I don't want to say momentum. I think momentum is so.
But I think then they maybe pull him out earlier. I think it's easier. I think in some respect it's less stressful for the bullpen to pitch with a lead than pitch from a tie game where you have to maybe feel like you have to be even more fine. Like, I think there's things that make it more advantageous for Cleveland in that situation.
Yeah, if you get a run one of those innings or you somehow scratch across both, you feel a lot better. And Skubal probably comes out a little bit sooner, and there's a little less pressure and tension as the game goes on. Matt Boyd, though, before we move on to some other stuff, Matt Boyd, I could have been more impressed with what he did. I mean, for a guy who was literally just rehabbing and throwing in his backyard and was on the street baseball-wise, to start the year, to be pitching in game 2, let alone how he pitched, is absolutely incredible. And that was such a great game call back there by Hedges and the game plan for the Guardians in general. His changeup and slider were just incredible. They were chasing everything. And I think it's pretty clear based on what they did in game 1 with Tanner's fastball, where it was all, letters and a little bit above that. Matt Boyd did not throw a ton of fastballs in the zone. As a matter of fact, he only got 2 swings and misses and 3 called strikes on the fastball, 6 foul balls. He was very careful about letting his fastball in the zone. It was almost like he was showing it to them, changing their eye level, and then coming back with the changeup. 7 whiffs, the changeup, 4 at the slider. He pulled 1 curveball out, and this says he had 1 unknown pitch. It was, StatCast didn't even register it, so who knows? But a really good game plan for Boyd, and I don't know how we thought he was going to pitch in a game 2 of the ALDS, but coming where he came from this season to be in the Guardians game 2 start. I mean, you and I both thought Matt Boyd was, if he pitched well for you, it was like found money in your pocket, right? You didn't count on it, but it was great. And for him to do what he did, I think is incredible, to go toe to toe with Tarik Skubal, who he's very good friends with.
Yeah, I think I have no issues with his performance. I don't understand anyone who does. He is not. If I was going back and doing box score here, I'll throw this to people who love it. Box score bingo, very quickly. Cleveland, one of the big problems in this, they had no walks, so they only had 3 base runners. That's 1 run. Like, they just didn't do that. Well, Detroit had 9 hits and 4 walks. That's 13 base runners. So they should average about 4 runs. So it should have been about a 3-run deficit no matter what. I think the 3 stars in this one, just very quickly. I know it's a loss, but still, I think Boyd and Smith each get one. And then honestly, Noel for his defense.
Yeah, we should talk about Noel a little bit in the final segment of the show. Any issues? Okay. This is going to trigger some people me asking this, but do you have, if this happens, this would not be the ideal situation. Do you have any issues going back to Matt Boyd in game 5 if it gets there?
No.
I'm a little split on it because I just wonder about the Tigers seeing him a second time because he doesn't have Tarik Skubal stuff. And like you always say, anybody can be hit.
Yeah.
If my odds are on who's going to get hit in a game 5, it's not going to be Tarik Skubal. It's going to be Matt Boyd. So that's my only thing. Like, he was great today. Doesn't mean he's going to be great going forward.
You're keeping Carpenter out of the lineup, which is a big bonus. And, or honestly, maybe you start Quintillo and then you go to Boyd. Like, maybe you double up that way.
Yeah, more lefties.
And then throw Sobrowski after that. That's just all lefties. Don't let Carpenter even play.
Oops, all lefties. Yeah, I like that plan. Yeah. Oops, all lefties. Maybe we'll see that before this series is out. It's already been a very weird series to begin with. All right, we'll talk about who is game 3 bigger for in just a minute.
But first, we are going to talk about our good friends over at FanDuel, and more importantly, so let's look at the line for the next game on Wednesday. Cleveland is still the favorite, even though it's to be determined on both sides. To hit a home run, best odds are on Kerry Carpenter, followed by Spencer Torkelson, tied with Jose Ramirez, then Noel. Riley Green is tied with Jake Rogers. This is some weird odds. I feel like if you really dug deep, you might be able to find something good here because they're not, the way these odds are lined up are not looking to me like the most in-depth ones they've ever had. To get a hit, just to get one hit, Stephen Kwan, best odds. Colt Keith and Matt Verling are your second two. I mean, I would take Kerry Carpenter over any of those guys with some of what we talked about tonight. But head over to FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start your season with a big return. America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, the biggest offer they've ever given us. When you play your first $5 bet, that's FanDuel.com.
MLB playoffs are going on. There's a lot of sports going on right now. You got football season, you got the NFL, you got college, hockey's starting up, the NBA's starting up. There's a lot of stuff going on. Game Time is the place you want to go. They got the new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. It's going to show you what the best deals are on each game, so you don't have to waste time looking through thousands of offers on tickets. It's going to tell you about the best deals, super deals, amazing deals, price comparisons for that kind of stuff. I'm going to be relying on Game Time a lot. You got playoff tickets you want to buy. Maybe you want to go up to Detroit for game 3 and 4. Maybe you want to go to a Cavs preseason game. I know there's a lot of concerts I want to buy tickets for coming up here soon. I was just saying how much money I'm going to drop in on concerts. Definitely bought some of those tickets on Game Time recently. I will tell you that because they take the guesswork out of buying tickets at Game Time because they have the all-in pricing feature. It tells you how much you're going to pay if you turn that option on. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB, get $20 off your first purchase. I got a lot of friends doing it. You should do it too. Terms apply. Again, create the account and redeem our code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. 3:08 on Wednesday from Detroit. That is the next game for the Guardians and the Tigers. ALDS Game 3. You can catch the action from Tom Hamilton on your SiriusXM app. Just search Guardians for that game. I believe Wednesday is a quadruple header. I think all 4 DS games are in action. So that'll be fun. Hopefully the Guardians win. They're leading off that day. I think they're the first game of the day, or maybe I have that wrong. Either way, a lot of baseball. You should just search for all that stuff on that day. Jeff, first off, baseball's stupid. And trying to predict it is even more stupid because let me go through my key factors and matchups for game 2 and see how wrong I was. I said need a big game from Jose. He went 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts. Tarik Skubal had him fishing in an empty pond for all those changeups. He was not good. He was Patience versus Tarik Skubal. They had 0 walks. So my prediction did not include John Kenzie Noel coming with two big defensive plays in right field. I could have predicted the strikeout that he had. But he had a catch in right field where he came over the line, caught it, and he lost his hat and his sunglasses in the sun. He still caught it, which I was like, that's pretty amazing. And then, of course, he had the big throw at second base to, was it Wenzel Perez? I think he threw out at second, or
was it Wenzel? Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was Wenzel Perez.
Yeah, I did not have that on my bingo card either. So
I missed his first play because I was teaching, but that second one, that was a big moment.
Game saver. Yeah, that potentially was a huge game saver, and that allowed Matt Boyd to turn the lineup over the way he needed to. Because I was like, all right, he gets out of this, he can go 7, 8, 9, and he did. I didn't have him going into the fifth inning, but he did. That could have been potentially a game-saving play, and it was at the time because you wanted to have that lead. So, out of all the things I could have tried to predict, John Kenzie Noel, defensive hero, was not among them. So, good for John Kenzie. All right, Game 3. We're not going to preview Game 3. We're going to talk about this. I feel like both teams have something that puts them against the wall in Game 3. Like it's a tied 1-1 series, so it's even. But I know a lot of people are going to be like, "Oh, this stinks," and I think it stinks because I don't want to say they have confidence against Clase, because I don't believe for a second that sequence of events for Emmanuel Clase is ever going to happen again this year. Like if he gives up a 2-run homer in this series, that would equal his all of his runs allowed all year.
Yeah.
So like I just don't see that happening again. But I just said baseball's stupid, and trying to predict it makes you look dumb. So I shouldn't say that. I don't like the idea that maybe Detroit has some confidence against him now after doing that. But this is the first set of the only set of back-to-back games in the series. The Tigers are going to bullpen their way through Game 3. Cleveland's going to go with Alex Cobb, who we think has like 45 to 50 pitches in his tank for this game. Hopefully that's not for 3 innings. But for Cleveland, you don't want to lose this game, because then the Tigers could clinch it on Thursday. And if the Tigers, I don't want to say they have house money, because they don't, but in a way they kind of do, because if they go 1-1 at home in Detroit, they know they push it back to Cleveland for Tarik Skubal in Game 5, which is in their favor. So they know that if they lose Game 1, they lose one of the games, but they win the other, they push this back to Cleveland, and they know they have an edge. However, I feel like if Cleveland wins on Wednesday, I don't think the Tigers want to face elimination with Tanner Bybee on the mound. So the Tigers should have a lot of pressure on Wednesday to not go to Thursday, having to beat Tanner Bybee to push it back to Cleveland. So like Cleveland does not want to lose a game in Detroit, because the prospect of a Game 5 in Cleveland against Tarik Skubal stinks. But I also don't think the Tigers want to go into Thursday with their season on the line against Tanner Bybee. So both teams are kind of, I feel like, up against the wall Wednesday. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it almost feels like whoever gets to Game 2 is going to win
Game
the whole
3.
darn.
Yeah,
Game 3. Whoever gets to win 2, I meant to say, is going to win the whole thing.
First the 2.
Yeah.
So who do you think has the more pressure on them in Game 3? It feels kind of equal in some ways, and it is a 1-1 series.
I think it's Cleveland just right now, because I do think Detroit's got to feel confident. They've won 3 out of 4 games. I think, and I know you and I disagree on the idea of momentum. I think it's a thing. I think it exists. I've played sports and kind of experienced that feeling of like the added level of confidence, the performing better because I'm like, because of how much of the game is mental. I think that is a real thing, and I think right now they have the advantage. I think Cleveland's under a little bit more pressure. It's like now it's a 3-game series, and 2 of the games are in Detroit. Like it's shifting in a lot of ways to Detroit's favor. So I think it is Detroit with the advantage here right now. Now we have to see, like the thing that can mitigate all of this is team chaos pitching. But I'll say at the same time, there's a lot of guys Cleveland really haven't seen in that bullpen because they came up late, who really haven't been used. Like they've managed, thanks to what Skubal did today, they've really maintained some of that kind of hidden edge in the bullpen.
Yeah, there is that. I don't think you saw, was it Gunther and Herter? Did they pitch in Game 1?
Nope. I don't believe so.
Gunther pitched in Game 1. Brant Herter did not. So and they ended up seeing Bo Brisky in this one. It's the first time I've seen Bo Brisky, I think. They've
Yeah,
seen
I
Will
guess
Vest
he's not
before.
going to start, is what I have learned.
Well, why not? He might start. Who knows?
I
He
guess
might start because
he
it's
could,
if he's
I
going to be
guess.
an opener. We think it's going to be Alex Cobb versus Jason Foley. That's Jason Foley did the media availability on Monday before the game, which is generally reserved for the next game starting pitcher, which is why I texted you very confused because originally Alex Cobb was not on the pregame media availability list. Gavin Williams was, and I was like, okay, are they going to Gavin in game 3? That's bizarre. But they used Gavin early in pregame media availability, and they went to Cobb, and they said Vogt said that they were going to Cobb in game 3. So it is Cobb. We'll preview a little more than that tomorrow. We'll talk about Gavin Williams coming out of the bullpen tomorrow as well. And then we probably should note before we get out of here today is Angel Martinez replaces Tyler Freeman on the roster. Freeman tweaked his oblique in batting practice a couple of days or 2 days ago, 1 day ago, whatever it was. And then he took an at bat against Ben Lively, and he said he felt it, and it was just too much. So he is now off the ALDS roster, but if Cleveland advances to the ALCS, he is also not eligible to return because if you remove someone from the roster during the season, they can't come back next round. Just so you're not manipulating rosters left and right. This is a very minimal change to talk about, but I will say this. I think it's a wash in terms of talent. I think I like Martinez's tools better. And hopefully we're talking about the last guy on the bench, right? Like this is not a big deal. I like, if you ask me like if I want who I want to start in the series out of these two, I'd pick Martinez. But if you ask me who I like bringing off the bench in the series, I kind of like Freeman a little more.
See, I still like Martinez just because the tools are a little more dynamic. But I'm not. Everyone by now knows it's like I've never been the biggest Freeman believer. So it's also not a surprise that I'm like, well, I just give me the toolsy guy who can do make a bigger impact with the bat.
Coming off the bench in sports is weird. I feel like Tyler Freeman's a little more better equipped to do it than Martinez. I feel like I said, if I had to choose one of these two guys to start in any game, I would pick Martinez. But coming off the bench, I would pick Freeman. But hopefully this is a negligible change because at the most you're getting a pinch runner. I think. Did you have any issues real quickly? I meant to bring this up earlier and we should get out of here. But Kyle Manzardo pinch hit in the 8th inning for Austin Hedges.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about that spot? Because that was essentially a one-time shot for him to be in the game because you weren't going to wait until he got to David Fry. I thought, what was that? Was that the 8th inning? I want to say it was the 8th inning. He flew out.
Yeah, I mean he hit it pretty well. It kind of makes you be like, man, we need to be seeing more of him. I know against lefties, but it's like even in that first game, it's like they should have.
He's got 2 at bats.
Did he end up getting 2 at bats?
No, I mean he's gotten 2 at bats in 2 games.
Yeah.
We don't talk about Cleveland neutralizing Kerry Carpenter as long as they could. Detroit's done the same thing to Kyle Manzardo. Cleveland wants to get Kyle Manzardo in the game, and they've only been able to do it in 2 at bats. And he almost hit a home run or at least a double off the wall.
Yeah.
But I didn't have an issue with him doing it.
No, I didn't have an issue with that either. Like,
you didn't want to wait
shots when you can get them.
Yeah. You didn't want to give another at bat to Austin Hedges, and you didn't want to pinch hit Bo Naylor. Manzardo was the right call there, I think.
And I don't have an issue with Hedges starting for all the reasons. You go back and listen to yesterday's show where we explained why there was an equal chance of success with Hedges versus Naylor. Yeah.
Well, magic number is 4. The Guardians need to score 4 runs. The Guardians need to win this series in 4. So the magic number we'll say is 4. Jeff's your 4th favorite blogger on all places today since he didn't get to do it. That's why he's your 4th favorite blogger. We'll be back tomorrow to recap. I shouldn't say recap, to preview game 3.
Hopefully we'll talk a little full info Royals on that one by then.
Yeah, and then we'll talk about Royals and Yankees too a little bit because that series looks like it's about to be tied 1-1. I shouldn't speak too soon because the Yankees did just hit a home run in the 9th inning, but we'll talk about that a little bit too and see if we can hopefully project ahead to a ALCS matchup somehow.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining us. We know after a loss like this, listen, you can tell I'm a little dispirited. I'm sure you are as well. So we thank you for joining us, taking the time. We hope you're able to see this team's still in it. Like more than anything else, I want to say that any pitcher can lose on any day. Any team can win. Maybe they just had all their off days together at once and it'll all come together. I still believe in this team. I'm still expecting them to win game 3. I want to thank you all for joining us, rating and reviewing. Downloading it helps. Make sure you hit the thumbs up. Tell a friend. A lot of people really vibed with my whole thing yesterday about local sports talk. Tell people this is where they can come to talk about the Guardians. Thank you all again, and go Guardians, go.